718, tracking Hurricane Ida extremely closely. We are expecting landfall now between the next 5 to 6 hours. It's getting extremely closely. So well-defined eye. Here's the immediate coastal areas there of Louisiana. And this is where we're expecting to make landfall. I was really trying to pinpoint on the map. It's going to be towards Grand Isle. So if you're familiar with this, and then just north of that is New Orleans. So southeast Louisiana bracing for a very powerful, strong Category 4 hurricane to make landfall between about noon to 1 o'clock today. The latest track from the National Hurricane Center. Now, this was the update that happened with this track. Take a look at the max sustained winds. This afternoon, as it's expected to make landfall, winds could be at 155. If this would have said 157, we would have had a Category 5 hurricane on our hands. So we are really bracing for a serious situation to unfold across the most of the coastline of Louisiana. So the latest track now at Cat 4, expected to make landfall right around our lunchtime hour, even overnight tonight as it weakens. Notice still a Cat 1 by this evening. So we're going to have several hours after this makes landfall to not only bring the storm surge and the really strong winds, but of course so much rain along with it right up and down the state of Louisiana at this point. And the impacts are going to be felt from areas well east and well west. As far as the winds go, we're going to continue to monitor from the National Hurricane Center as hurricane hunters are flying in. They're investigating Hurricane Ida at this point. If they do find winds, they did find one up to 160. If we do see that again, the pressure has continued to drop this morning. Again, we could have a Cat 5 on our hands. And then to go ahead and bring in Tim Pandages. I know you've been monitoring not only the status, but of course that wind field along with it. Break down what you've been tracking as far as those winds go. I'll send it over to you.
Yeah, so to give us some comparison here, a Category 1 hurricane at 75 miles per hour compared with a Category 4 hurricane at 150 miles per hour. The Category 4 is 256 times more damaging. The multiplier in terms of damage is that much higher. It's exponentially higher with the amount of energy being released in the way of wind and wave action from the storm as it builds inland. Right now it's sitting at 150. Gusts are 165 to 170. So this storm, it may even get a little bit stronger. It's still got about 6 to 8 hours over the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Sustained winds right now, we've got a buoy right in that northeast quadrant where we're finding the strongest winds sustained at 84. And on radar, this eye has been within range of radars out of New Orleans for about the last 12 hours or so. And you can see it's a rather large eye. It's about 15 miles in diameter. And you're finding the strongest of the winds in that area around the eye, called the eye wall. And it's also got very strong rainfall. And also in some of these last images, there's been some lightning, which is very unusual. That means that there's a lot of updrafts, very strong updrafts, and the storm is continuing to intensify there. Now, as we go forward, these bands will continue to lift inland. And on the outside bands here, the threat is actually there for some tornadic activity too. That's not uncommon with tropical systems as those bands lift over land. Now we're looking at some of these heavier bands now and the strongest of the winds working on in towards Grand Isle, Terrebonne, Lafourche, Plaquemines, the southern portions of Jefferson Parish, the Bayou parishes here are going to not only see the brunt of the wind, the rain, but also the storm surge because we're getting that onshore wind persisting for several hours. Now you may be asking yourself, well, why is this storm continuing to strengthen? Sea surface temperatures, the fuel for these storms, has only been going up. Temperatures in the water just off the coast and the shelf waters here are nearly 90 degrees. You need 80 or warmer, and this is more than sufficient to induce some more deepening and maybe get us up to a Category 5 hurricane at landfall. Now, winds going forward from here, they're just going to get stronger as it builds inland. 60, 70, 80 mile sustained winds, higher than that likely, gusts well over 100. And notice even by midnight tonight, we're still getting those winds as it slowly builds inland and starts to weaken a bit by tomorrow. We'll talk more about that storm surge and the rest of that forecast for you with Cheetah coming up in a few minutes.
Tim, and in fact, I wanted to show you just to keep our guard up here. Yes, even though our impacts are minimal to zero in Houston as we're looking at that Cat 4, take a look across the Atlantic right now. We have several different waves we're monitoring. So we have the next 3 weeks where we're going to really be heading towards the peak of hurricane season with all of these different waves. We're going to break this down forecast and talk about our impacts here locally coming up just after the break.